So CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is a somewhat new organization. We've been around for about 3 years. But I've been in the government open source community for a while longer than that. And the last chance I had to come to an event like this, most of the conversation revolved around whether or not it was even legal for a federal agency to use open source software. So it was really heartening to see the last two presentations, because it seems like the conversation has gotten way past that and is now about joining the community. The only trouble is that I made my presentation expecting that we were going to be focused on whether or not it was legal to use open source software in the federal space. So with that in mind, let's get started. So like I said, we are somewhat new, and I'm having trouble with the button. Should I just... There we go. So we are new, and about a year ago, we published a source code policy. And that policy says very clearly, we use open source software. Next slide. But it also says, on top of using open source software, we share our own. So we have about 50 designers and developers in-house. And our policy says that whenever we write our own code, we will share that publicly, and we will do that as the rule rather than the exception. Why do that? Next slide. For one, it's the right thing to do. All of our code is funded by public dollars. Therefore, whenever we make something, that product should be available to the public. But it's more than that. Next. It also helps our mission. It helps our mission because when we build something, we don't have all the answers. We'd like to have the minds of the world focus on something and be able to make it better. And that's what they're doing. Next slide. And I really think that when other agencies use our code, we all win. The federal government does a lot of things that are very common within government and are not that common outside of government. That means there's a big gap in the market for software that does government stuff. It would be great if the government acted as a single entity and built something to fulfill a need, shared it with other agencies, and then let every other agency perform its mission using that same platform that another agency already built. Next slide. So in that spirit, I'm here today as this guy, and I really want to sell you some of my code for free. Next slide. So the first one, I'm going to run through a few of the applications we've built in the hopes that some of these things will strike you as useful for your own mission. First, e-regulations. I know there are people in the audience today who work in or around regulations. We built this application to support our regulatory mission. About a year ago, our regulations team came to us and said, we're really in pain. Simply to even read a regulation, we need to get out a book that's several hundred or even maybe in some cases thousands of pages long, flip through it and find a certain section, and then see that there was actually an official interpretation to what the regulation says here. And then we get out the official regulation, which is the official interpretation, which is even longer. Then I have to thumb through that, then find out what the interpretation is on page 700 for what it says over here on page 300. When a regulation changes from year to year, there's no way to go back and see what the regulation used to say. It leads to all kinds of problems. Can you help us build something that makes this a little bit more sane for us? So we did, and it's called e-regulations. I'm going to go through a few screenshots. Next slide. So the first thing it lets you do is it gives you inline definitions. So for example, we're a financial regulator, and the terms in a regulation have a very specific meaning for that context. For instance, financial institution. That has a certain definition. It used to be that to find out what the definition was in the context of the reg, you had to go down, maybe if you were looking at it online, scroll down to the bottom of the page where the footnotes were, and then read the definition of that term, and then scroll all the way back up to where you were. Right now, the definitions are in line. Just click an underlined term, and the definition shows up on the right side. Also, it gives you inline interpretations. So if you read a section and you want to know what the official interpretation of that is, just click and the interpretation is exposed. Next slide. And then we have a fully documented API. Now, what I just showed you is a way to is a better way of displaying and navigating a regulation. But underneath that is an engine that ingests the text of a regulation, parses it, and then spits it out as structured data. This means that we can do anything we want in the stream of the regulations process from beginning to end, and we can do it on this platform. We haven't built those other tools yet. For instance, integrating the notice and comment period into this tool. That hasn't happened yet, but the API is there. Next slide. And you can help us make that by going to this address. The software is there for you. It's based on Python. The API is in Django. We're using Haystack and Backbone to support it. And I really hope this strikes you as interesting and that you'll go back, maybe talk to your regulations customers and say, would this be valuable to you? Next slide. The next one is EC2 Mapper. We use AWS to host our public website. One of the issues that our cybersecurity team had with AWS is that it didn't give them a way to find out, to easily audit our AWS environment and to find out what had changed over time, or to get just the current status of what was going on, what instances we had running and what we didn't. So they built a dashboard to help them do that. And then we shared that publicly. Next slide. So one of the things you can very easily do is say to the dashboard, make me a list of all of our instances in terms of their status between these two dates. And then once you do that, it'll say, okay, here are all of your instances, and here is what has happened in that time frame. Some of them were stood up, some of them were turned down, some of them have been static. Next slide. You can also hover over every instance as you like and just get instant details. Next slide. And then you can view instances by security groups. So we have several security groups in our AWS footprint. You can filter those. So if you want to say, I only want to see the instances in this VPC right now, because that's all I'm interested in, just click, and then you see all the instances in there, and then you have all the other tools about time frame, et cetera, available to you. Next slide. So again, it's available to you. It's based on Mongo and Node.js. Next slide. Those are just two repos. I think, Clinton, we have about a dozen or so totally open. And if you want to see all of our code, it's up on cfpb.github.io. Also, we've had a few agencies come by and say, we're interested in what you're doing. Can we do a technical deep dive? We'd love to do that. If you're interested, please let us know and we'll have you over and show you how you might be able to integrate this into your enterprise. To finish up, we're going to give a demo of one more tool that we've open sourced, and it's called Q. Q is spelled Q-U. A bit of background: we, as I think Kathy was just talking about, back in May, the White House issued the open data strategy. It's going to mandate that every agency begin publishing its data. We deal with a lot of data, and some of that is mortgage data. And we were researching our options for publishing this mortgage data a while back, and we found that none of the products out there really did what we needed them to do. So we built our own, and it's going to be launching soon, and Clinton is going to demo what's going on behind the scenes of that.
Great, thank you, Matt. I know how well live demos work at conferences, so I was excited to do this. So let's see if that comes up on the monitor there. Great. So as Matt said, we deal, one of the things we deal with is this home mortgage data. And my team has been working on tools to let people visualize this data and manipulate it in different ways. This data has been available since, I think it's 1976 was when the regulation was first enacted. And you can go today and find the data online for the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. It's every application record in the US. But it's in 2 to 3 gigabyte CSV files. Not that fun to deal with. Not many people know exactly how to deal with those. A lot of the data about them, how to interpret them, is in PDFs. That's not machine readable. And that's just not something that makes sense for us to use these days, especially when we're trying to make tools that other people can use. So This right here is a page that we have that shows some information about the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. And you can see a sample app that we've built about it right here. You can see there's this map here shows the change in mortgage applications and origins. And you can see, say, in 2010, there was a decline in mortgage applications. And in 2011, it increased dramatically. This visualization is great, but we want people to be able to dig even deeper. This is just an example of an app that we would want people to be able to build on top of this. And so we've built a data explorer that people can go in and look at the data. This right here is our data explorer. And using it, I'm going to quickly just look for something. So I can look here and I can see how I can select different types of data. I can select the location, applicant information, and then I can summarize it. So looking here, I can see how many records there were that match my filters. And then I'm going to go in here and say that I want to summarize them by state. And let's go ahead and just do it by the applicant sex. And the action taken. Great. So looking at that, I hit submit, and immediately I get this data back that tells me how many loans were originated by these different subsections. Now, you can see some stuff in here where it says the information wasn't presented or that it's not applicable, and that's not really that useful to me. So just to demonstrate how this API might work and do stuff quickly, I'm going to go in here and say I only want ones where I know the gender of the applicant. Go back to summary tables, and you can see I've got a different number of records, and I've got this now all in here. Scrolling. You can see that I have, in Alabama, male and female numbers, Alaska, and so forth. And this is good too, but this needs a powerful API to display this. This is still a user tool, something that, an average user could go in and get information that they could use, but for a researcher or for an application developer, they need a real powerful API. Well, in order for all this to work, we need an API that would handle that amount of data. It's not big data. I don't like to use that word. I would say medium data. It's 120 million records, roughly, about 130 maybe, for what we're currently doing, which is 5 years of mortgage data. We've used a COTS product in the past for our data APIs, but in this case, the COTS product just could not handle the amount of data that we were dealing with, so we need to build our own. Well, using open source, we've done that. This may be the only point during your entire day you're going to get to see code. I'll make it super short, I promise. But we use two pieces of open source technology in particular. We used MongoDB, which was mentioned before. And that's if you're not familiar with it, the reasons we used it, it's schema free. It allows us to have lots of different shapes of data so that we could serve any type of data set. And it allows us to build our own aggregations. We also used a Java-based language called Clojure. Here's an example of it. I told you I'd make that super quick. But it's very good at doing multi-threading, which is something that matters a lot when you're dealing with large amounts of data. It's also specifically made for data manipulation. So let's see what we made. I have an API console here. Anyone that's familiar with an API knows that generally you work with it from another machine, and so it's not something that's very visible to human beings. So we have just an easy console to sort of let people build their API queries. And looking at this, I can have the exact same query that I just showed you through the user-facing tool, but I can see how to build it in here. I type in how I want to group things, the information I want. I have a query language where I can create structured queries, and it tells me that this right here will let me get that information, whether it be via JSON or XML or CSV, however I want it. I can run that query through the console and get that data back immediately. Here's the point where I click a button in a live demo and we see how that works. It apparently is working. That's great. So you can see here that is that same data that we were looking at before. In this case, I'm asking for data that I couldn't get the other way, which is the average applicant income. I want to know what, and that's in thousands of dollars. Most people do not make $80 or $79 a year. So using that, I could get further data though. This is a lot of data. So let's say that I wanted to sort of drill down. I want to see the Washington, D.C. area and how people are doing there. And in fact, I want to go ahead and get the number and the average. I could run that exact same query. It gives me the URL that I'd use if I were building a tool based off this to get the data. And you can see here it comes back, focused just on this area. you can analyze this data in lots of different ways. We're not going to look at this list of different ways here, but you can see there's a large list on your screen of information I could get back. I just want to quickly show that you can get it back however you want, depending on your tools. So if you wanted JSON, there we are. There's all that data via JSON. If you want it via XML, you could do the same thing. Another thing that we built into this is all that data that was locked up in PDFs that was not machine readable, we make it machine readable. So anyone who's dealt with a large data set knows that a lot of times you get back codes for the city or the regulating agency or whatever. We have all that information in here so that you can, again, via machine, look and see all the information that you might need about those. So here's concept. One of the concepts is the MSA, that is the metropolitan area. And you can see here we have a table of all the codes and years and what the names of those are. So if you need to look that up, you can get that. And then you can get for it via JSON or XML or whatever you might need, as you can see right here. So this is available today. The API itself will be public in a short while. It's not up yet. We are working on getting that up, but the code to power this is available today. And the cool thing about it is we didn't build a data platform for the specific data set. We built a data platform that will be able to go with us and with other agencies into the future so that you could serve any data set through this. The code is online at GitHub, and we have extensive documentation that talks about how to set it up, how to query on it, and how to set up your own data so that it can be imported, publishing data with this. That's Q. We're really excited about it, and we're really excited to see other agencies and even private organizations use it for their data.